Good morning, everyone. Happy Eating Disorders Awareness Week. I'm sure that you're all well aware that this is the week that's happening, but we're really grateful to be joining with y'all this morning to be connected and to be opening up this discussion about what recovery really means. So I'm really excited to be here with everyone. My name is Lydia Rhino. I am the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation located in Denver, but we provide free services for individuals and families throughout the entire country and internationally. I also have my little Pomeranian bear on my lap here. So if you hear a bark, that is him. I will hand it over to Chelsea to introduce herself, and then we'll go around and get all of our panelists introduced, and then we'll dive into this discussion.
Great. Thank you, Lydia, and welcome everyone. Happy Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome to How We Recover. And if you are back, welcome back. We're really happy to have you here. And we've got a really big topic today, which is what do we even mean by recover? We could really spend the entire time on just that question alone. My name is Chelsea. I'm the executive director, the founding director of Eat, Breathe, Thrive. We are an international, almost global organization at this point, supporting people with eating disorders all over the world. We're really happy. We've been doing this collaboration with EDF for a good year now, I think over a year, which is wonderful. And this is some of my favorite events. Maybe we'll go to Esther first, introduce herself, and then to Caroline, and then we'll get started.
Hello, it's so good to be here. My name is Esther, and I am currently a volunteer for actually three different organizations. So, for EDF as a peer mentor, EBT, I'm starting to help with the social media graphics design, and for ANID as like a helpline volunteer. So, definitely passionate about eating disorder recovery, and so thankful to be here today.
Hello, I'm Caroline. I'm so happy to be here. I am a volunteer at Eat, Breathe, Thrive, and I've recently just started volunteering and I'm kind of working with the socials and graphics. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, and I should say, I mean, we didn't say where we're all from, but and where we're all living. But if you want to drop in the chat where you are, I'm actually in the Peak District today in the United Kingdom. I've just walked in the door, which is lovely. I've got a big green, spacious, beautiful place behind me. I don't know if everyone else wants to say where you are.
I put it in the chat, but Moore Park, California, 50 miles north of Los Angeles.
I am in downtown Denver.
I put it in the chat as well, but I'm in London, UK.
Excellent. Yeah, and please join us in telling us where you are in the world. And I'll kick it off with our first question. And I also want to encourage you, if you have questions come up as we talk, or if you have comments or things resonate with your own experience, please do drop it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it as we go along. Well, I should also say all of us are in recovery. All of us are in various stages of recovery. We define recovery in different ways. And that is really our question today. So I might just kick it off with that. How do you understand what it means to be in recovery, or recovered from, or recovering from, or whichever words you use to define your own experience from an eating disorder?
I can go. So recovery, I think from treatment, like from my entering treatment and then kind of transitioning out, I was in treatment for about 2 years, um, some in person, some virtual. And then I had a therapist from treatment days that I still thought of as like, okay, we're still working on treatment. And I think recovery always, the meaning of it transitioned for me. When I first was recovering and really in the thick of my eating disorder, I thought recovery was this perfect end goal. I thought, like, oh, yeah, once I get there, it's going to be like kind of, I almost thought of it like a almost magical like kind of place to end up because it didn't feel realistic to me because of how neck deep I was in my eating disorder past and behaviors. Um, I always heard that recovery isn't linear. Yeah, okay. So I had ups and downs constantly throughout recovery. Most of the time, I didn't believe it was possible for me, but I wanted it so badly that I stayed on path and I followed my treatment plan because I had already lived for 15 years prior to that with my eating disorder. So I was like, I've trusted my eating disorder for this long. I have to keep trusting in the treatment plan that's been given to me. I think uh, when I really started to feel like, okay, I actually understand that I'm at a point where I'm managing my eating disorder. It was when I was able to like in therapy in a modality called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, we learn about something called life worth living. And we were asked to define that for ourselves. I created little pictures and drawings for myself to try to visualize that. And when I started to feel like it's not just about, okay, I'm trying to keep up with my meal plan. Oh, I'm trying to abstain from behaviors. I'm trying to like be vulnerable with people in my life and talk to people that are outside of support groups or treatment team. That's when I started to realize like, oh, I think this might be working. And Timeline, in ANID as a helpline, and I'm going to become a support group leader soon. And they tell us not to talk about Timeline. They don't want us to give people like, oh, time, because we get stuck on numbers. Even in terms of eating disorder recovery timeline, that could be a number. So I don't want to say how long it took me. For me, it took longer than I thought. When I first entered treatment, I was like, give me 2 months. Like, let's speed up this process. I'm ready. And the reality was, it took me a long time to be able to say, okay, I feel like I'm not only managing my recovery, but at this point, it's not like I'm thinking about it all the time anymore. What I do think about all the time is when I'm able to do things differently. I went on a trip recently, this past weekend to Mammoth. I had the energy. I had the stamina to keep up with my friends. I had the social capability to, instead of shutting down, like engage. And I drove for 4.5 hours and then let my friend take over. I couldn't do any of this when I was really in my eating disorder. And every moment I was just like, wow, nobody knows this. Like, nobody knows this on the trip, but these are all hallmarks for me. These are all highlights for me because I feel different. But I can't say that it was like yeah, I woke up one day and this is what happened. It was a very gradual thing. And I think recovery for me means I'm able to show up for my life worth living, not perfectly. I don't think recovery should be an end goal. I think it's everybody's in recovery from something. And it's just about putting the work in every day and taking it day by day and really taking that like end goal mindset out of the picture for me.
I can share now. I I resonate a lot with what you just said, Esther, feeling like I guess feeling like there's sort of a pressure to recover by a certain time frame or in a certain way. And I think that recently I've really come to terms with the fact that there's really no one right way to recover. Um, and it's different for everyone. And I was in treatment for a couple of months and it didn't work for me. I really struggled. I felt stuck, and I was labeled as resistant, and I was getting worse. And I never, I just didn't feel like I could recover and get to a certain point. And I thought in my head that there was this like flip that switches. Like once you're recovered, you're recovered, and there's no like second guessing, and it's just like everything feels different. and I feel like now I am physically recovered, but that like one little switch, I don't feel that switch. Like I'm still constantly recovering every day, and it's a process. Um, but I think for me, recovery is just having like self-compassion and being gentle with yourself and knowing that it's okay if what you think recovery should look like didn't look like that. Because I then, after treatment, found a therapist and a dietitian that worked for me. And all of a sudden, things just started to click, and I was able to stick with my plans, and I was able to get I was really clear with my values and what I didn't want to lose in my life and things that I wanted to put my energy towards, and all of the other voices and things that I had, like behavioral patterns and things that I had put so much value in, just felt a lot less important. And so yeah, for me it was just really big on finding my own my own method of recovery. Yeah.
I can go. My name's Colleen.
Sure,
Can you hear me?
Colleen. Yeah, Colleen. Go for it. We're happy. We're happy to hear from.
Okay.
We usually do the panel with the four of us, but I would actually really love to hear from you. So
Okay.
please, yeah, sure, go
Thank
for it.
you. Because I just don't know how much longer I can. I've had suffered from an eating disorder for, you don't like numbers, well, I'm gonna give you a number, 50 years, in and out of treatment over the 50 years. And I have never, ever said I'm recovered or in recovery. For me, I call it remission. And that's how I've lived for the last 50 years. I'm in and out of remission, always aware that I'm a victim of this terrible disease and that it can always come and face me and put up roadblocks and stone walls. And some days I'm eventually able to take them down, but some days, no, they remain there. So for me, it's in and out of remission. I'm just happy that I've lasted this long, because there were some very, as you all can probably relate, struggling times. That's all I have to say. Recovery is not in my vocabulary, it's remission. Thank you for the
That's
time.
Thank you, Colleen. No, I'm so glad you shared, and I think what you shared, for all of us, we all use different language to describe our experience, and so yeah, if that word recover doesn't resonate, it may be remission, it may be something else. I know some people use the word healing, so I think you've got to claim those words and claim your experience, and we have to make space for all of that. So I love that, and I want to encourage anyone else that wants to share. Please drop it into the chat. We're monitoring the chat. We'd really love to hear kind of how you use your experience. Um, I can go, I guess, Lydia, because I'm off, and then I'll hand it to you. Maybe give us the next question. Yeah, when I think of when I think of what it means to me to be in recovery, recovering, recovered, I probably I feel like my felt experience is being recovered, just because what it was like to have an eating disorder versus what my life is like now feels so starkly different. But I don't mind being in recovery either. I don't mind that language too much. But the word that comes to mind is freedom. I to me it's an experience of freedom. I was so I was just I couldn't look at a plate of food and not have horrible thoughts in my mind. I couldn't look at my body and not have those thoughts. And it was just constant. It was rumination, it was rigid thinking, it was and I couldn't see a way out. And that made my life feel very, very dark. And I didn't think I'd still be here, at this point. So for me, being in recovery, being recovered, recovering, all of that was just a progressive opening up of more and more freedom in my life, to be able to enjoy simple pleasures, to be present in my relationships, like Esther said, to not judge myself quite so harshly, to be self-compassionate, as Caroline said. So yeah.
feel like this is like one of the best conversations to have because we allow everyone to define it themselves. Because I feel like that's always something that when I hear like in groups, it's like, well, what is recovery? I need to know so I can achieve it. And it feels very much like I'm like, oh yeah, that's like so like in my mind, it's like I can hear like the eating disorder voice popping in and being like, we need to know what we're working for so we can have an end point, like Esther said, like having that goal. And I think that's been so much of the work is like releasing the pressure for there to be that end point. And like I personally use the word like recovery. For me, that feels very expansive. And like I have the space to continue growing and to continue just challenging different thought patterns that come up. So I think that like recovery for me has evolved from just eating disorder recovery into like codependency, exploring other attachment you know, like things that I've navigated, all of these different areas. So for me, like recovery is my word to say that I get to continue to grow and challenge myself and continue to evolve, and giving myself the space to do that takes away that like expectation for perfection, which I think also still will like pop in and out, you know, and like there'll be times where I'm like, oh, there's that voice. And even though it's not manifesting in eating disorder behaviors, I can see the way that it might be coming out in control in this area. So for me, it really is like, yeah, I think also like the freedom that comes with being able to say, like, I get to have a choice and it's not the eating disorder's choice what I do. It's that I have a voice and that overrides the eating disorder. And I think it's been really cool even to listen to like everyone's different shares around the word, because I'm like, oh yeah, my definition of recovery has evolved so much in my years that I've been in recovery. Like I think in the beginning, I was like, no, I will know when I'm recovered. You know, like when I reach that point, I will know. And I don't even have like a date in my mind where I'm like, oh, that's when I started to feel that way. It was so gradual. And like all of the cliche things that we hear, it's like they're cliches for a reason. And I don't think for me that clicked until I really was like, oh yeah, recovery is not linear. There's going to be times where it's like I've had different traumatic events happen in my recovery where I'm like, maybe it was like a little wobbly. And then I'm like, yeah. And then that's when we keep going, because recovery can be like this, and it's not going to be the perfect little graph that we all love to see and the upward trends. But yeah, the freedom, the self like exploration that comes, the growth, the adaptability that I've had. Um, yeah, all of those things to me is recovery. It's like allowing myself to just exist without the pressures and the rules and the confines of societal expectations, of my own personal expectations. Um, recovery feels like such a big word. I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, so hard to actually just like nail down one thing that it is. Yeah, I love it. I don't have another question popping up in my head right now, so I don't know if anyone else does. Chelsea.
Oh, I've got so many questions. Yeah. Um, I wonder about if you can think back to when you were really in it, like in your eating disorder, and when recovery felt completely out of the picture. Like, what? Yeah, that's never happening for me, you know, at that. I don't know if you ever had that experience, but I wonder what helped you start to um not we know it's not linear, right? It's not an endpoint, but what helped you start to close the gap between where you were and at least where you are in your recovery journey right now, when it felt really far away and very distant and impossible even?
Um, most of my like early treatment days were like mostly bad. It was dark, and it was just reflective of the darkness that I'd always carried around. But I think for the first time in my life, I wasn't able to hide and numb and dissociate from with the eating disorder. So I thought I think it was most difficult because I in when I was in residential, I thought like once I get out of here, things will be okay. Um, but I knew that the thing that landed me there in the first place would just be right on around the corner, waiting for me once the distractions or the usual things that I do to kind of cope, aka self destruct. Oh, lost its appeal and effect. So I actually had to turn to a lot of, um, I'm not a religious person. I would say I'm spiritual, but not religious. I respect all religions, of course, and whatever works for people based on um, their lives and their values. 100% respect. But just for me, I had no faith in anything because I felt like my life, if there was a God, then God had left me in the dust, and I never had plans to grow old. I never had plans to go past 30, as morbid as that sounds. And I remember kind of desperately, because like treatment was helping with the behavior management, and it was lovely being able to finally hear validation from my therapists and my peers in groups for the first time. But it still was this empty feeling once I was out of those safe, controlled settings. And I took a lot of walks, just listening to podcasts, just desperately trying to find something that would feel like, okay, like something's got me, something like I'm gonna be okay. Um, and I remember I just kept hearing about like how most of the people who kind of go through hard things, they have faith in something. It doesn't have it all, terminology aside, the actual essence of it is pretty similar across all regions and races and religions. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. And so I just started like, especially at night, that was the hardest for me because I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia. And every night I would be awake in crippling anxiety and fear. And that's how I went to sleep. That's how I slept. And that's how I woke up. And so I started just incorporating little like prayers to nothing, just no one, just like not, no one in particular. But I was like, please guide me. Just please guide me to the right place at the right time. Um, like, please show me the way. Please show me the way. And even just saying those things in the darkness to nobody, it actually showed me that instead of spiraling in the same ways that I would, um, it was neurologically changing my brain, like creating a neural pathway to say, even in the most hopeless times, I'm going to show myself that I can instill a little bit of hope in myself. And that truly felt self created. That wasn't like, oh, my therapist gave me a homework assignment and I did it. Or, um, yeah, I'm doing this to please someone else. I'm like, no, like I have nothing to hold on to right now. I'm grasping in darkness. And I gotta say, never thought I would be someone who prays, but just saying those things out loud every single night in the moments of like, the darkest times for myself, I started to realize that I could, like, for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm not against myself. Like, I can have my back sometimes. And this mind of mine isn't just a realm of like negativity and darkness. And very, very early, like kind of habit that I've created, but that I think plays with that is the same thing as like, I think in therapy, we learn about reframing our cognitive distortions or saying a mantra or something. I really think it's similar to those things. And it sucks. It's cliche for a reason. Like, oh, like, reframe your cognitive distortions, say a positive mantra. Like, no, like, God, give me something better than that. But actually, the times when I felt most alone, I derived from the support I was getting from my therapists. And I really remembered that I deserved, even though my eating disorder didn't believe it, the person who received that help in therapy sessions, I was like, there's someone in there that apparently deserves support and love. So I'm going to try to tap into that and then speak from that place. Um, Not easy. And that's just one thing, but really powerful practice for myself.
I can go. I can. I really resonate with that, Esther. I think there were I don't know if I would have used the term faith, but there's definitely periods in my recovery where I guess it was faith. I had to really trust in something bigger. I used to, what comes to mind is my mom used to, when I was in the hospital, she used to I would wake up and she would say, "It's a new day," every single day. And she would like, I mean, now I look back on it, I'm like, it's so cheesy, but she would have me write these like mantras, like it's always darkest before the dawn. And like, it's just like, and I look back and I think it's really cheesy, but I would write it until I believed it. I'd draw it on and I would like color it in and almost try to just make the words feel true, like there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, all kinds of things like that. And I would draw it in pretty letters and I would just color it all day while I was in treatment. So I really resonate with that. I think the other thing I would add to that that's completely different is how did I close that gap between feeling like it was impossible and I was never going to get there to I don't know that this will be true for everyone, but there was a period where I had to surrender. I, and in some ways I didn't have a choice, because I was committed to a hospital involuntarily. I didn't have any choice to leave, but I did because I could have continued fighting, which is what I'd done my entire time. I was scared. I was scared. I was terrified to let go of my eating disorder. It was everything I was. It was who I was. And there was a point that I had to completely surrender to the people around me, which was also terrifying because I had to trust that these doctors were taking me down a path that was going to be better than where I was. And I didn't know them. I didn't like them. But there was a point at which I had to surrender, and every single day felt hard. Every single step felt, everything in me was like, no. And I had to just let go and blindly trust that I was in good hands and I was being, and it wasn't easy, it wasn't like all of a sudden I surrendered and then, there was still some fighting every single day, but that was it, is I had to really realize that I wasn't going to get myself out of this by myself. And I had to trust that the people around me actually did have my best interest in mind, even though most days I didn't feel that way. So, and those mantras helped in that process.
I think that's so many parts of both of yours, the spirituality and the surrender. Surrender to me is like the biggest part. I think that I finally was like, I went to treatment like back to back, like within like a year. Like I had like a tough time transitioning back into like life and creating that sustainably for myself. And when I went back, I was like, I know where my eating disorder is going to lead me, right? Like I'm like rationally, I think I just had like a day, it might have been after a therapy session, it might have been after chatting with peers, but like I was like, I think that like if I continue to allow my eating disorder to be in my life, like it's going to lead me back here time after time. And I wanted to trust my eating disorder, but then when I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, like I wound up back here within months. So is this what I want to keep doing? And giving myself then the space to say, like, okay, well, like if I know what's going to happen, I don't know what's going to happen. If I like
Andrew,
trust the doctors and if I trust the team to like give me that support, I don't know that outcome. So could that possibly be better
is
than
there
what I
anything
know the eating disorder will give me? So I think I like was able to like examine those and say like I'm going to surrender to trusting that these people that have
Lydia, can you come back on? I'm
there we
sorry, I
go.
had to mute.
I just
Yeah.
yep, I just saw that it popped on. But yeah, just surrendering to the knowledge, the expertise that the doctors had and being like, okay, well, like I don't know if I personally trust them, but I'm going to surrender that they could know something more than my eating disorder does. So I think flipping that on itself, and just with like I had to go through a weight restoration process, and also saying like I don't know what my body's going to look like, and like there's like some acceptance and commitment based therapy that came in that I was like, and I'm just going to accept that I can live in whatever body my body ends up, throughout this process. And not to say it wasn't hard, I can obviously look back on it now with a lot easier of understanding and compassion. I think at the time it was really hard. But now I'm like, yeah, like it's just like I can't engage in those behaviors. So I'm gonna accept what my life is gonna look like and I'll make it work. Because I know that I listened to a podcast that there was someone that said, like, if I'm given the chance, I'm gonna bet on myself and I'm gonna choose that I'm gonna be able to like trust in myself that I'll be able to get through things. And I think I try to always think about that. Like, no matter what's happening, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to trust that I can help myself through it, obviously, with the help of other people as well. But I think, yeah, that's been like such a huge part. But the spirituality part too, I'm thinking about like when we like ask for guidance or anything, that's like allowing help in. And I think that's something that for me has been always a really tough thing to do of like, I don't want to appear weak or any of those kind of words that come up in my head when I like that association that I was nurtured in of like, if you ask for help, you're such and such. Um, and working to dismantle that and say, like, I want to be guided, I want support, I want to be helped is such an act of bravery that I still notice myself sometimes coming up against and being like, can I allow space for asking for guidance? Because what if I do get guidance and that means I have to believe that that can be real for me? So it's very interesting, but I love, yeah, surrendering, I think, was like a first step for me of saying, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it might be better than the eating disorder. So I'm willing to roll those dice.
Caroline, do you want to answer that one? Or and if you're muted and can't figure out how to unmute yourself, don't worry. See if this will work. There we
Okay,
go.
perfect. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute. Um, yeah, I resonate a lot with what all three of you said. I think for me, how I closed the gap was just not isolating myself anymore. And I think surrendering played a big role in that and allowing people in and yeah, allowing myself to accept help because I had gotten to a point where I couldn't say that I was fine and I couldn't deny it and I couldn't lie anymore and I couldn't do it by myself. Um, and so yeah, just opening up to my friends and my family and having them constantly checking in and having them there and having kind of more of a community around me. Um, and also really just like looking to people who were in recovery or had recovered as inspiration because I really wanted it. I really wanted to get better. I just didn't know how to do it and I didn't think I could do it, but I wanted it. And in treatment, I think why I struggled so much was because I was surrounded by other sick people. And although it was a really important, like, safe space to be able in our group therapy sessions to share what was going on, it made me feel really kind of trapped and stuck. And it felt really heavy to have to hold kind of everything that people were sharing in therapy sessions, especially when I was in that mental state and I was already really fragile. Um, and so I think just kind of turning my focus to people who had done it or just friends and family that were there to support me helped me a lot, and helped me kind of get out of that rut that I felt so stuck in for such a long time.
Cool. Oh, what great answers. Lydia, do you mind if I bring in a question from the audience? Okay, great. There's a couple here, so I'll just say that I've seen a couple questions. I do want to go to the one around treatment trauma in a moment. So just so you know, I'm going to come back to that one. But I think this is a good one to segue from where we are. Is so, and you can answer this in any way. So the question is, how did you get from that kind of space of recovered enough, or some sort of, maybe like you're still halfway in the eating disorder and halfway not, to that freedom that we were talking about. But I just want to, in saying that, the answer might be, I haven't, I'm still in that, or it depends on the day, so um, it, so you can tackle that question um, however it speaks to you.
I can go. Um, that's really interesting because when I read in quotes recovered enough, I was like, you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm recovered enough right now. Like I'm not at the point of like complete freedom where like um I'm like, yeah, no, everything that I struggled with is better because the truth is, my eating disorder stemmed from trauma. It stemmed from not being able to cope in a environment that I felt completely out of control in when I was a child. So it's only natural that when I feel that way in different stressful times in my life, or even just daily moments in my life, that the controlling aspects of my eating disorder will come out. And Lydia, like you said, it will take different forms as well. It's like was when I got the eating and the weight aspect and like the health vitals aspect kind of controlled, I had another whole set of therapy work to do because they all stemmed from something. And unless I got to the core of those things, I never felt like I was free. Um, I think now I think of recovery in the gray. I think of recovery as flexible. So I can be recovered enough sometimes, and sometimes I can feel free. So it's not like a black and white kind of thing. I know we say that a lot in eating disorder recovery. I guess everything in life is never black and white. So yeah, I think when I truly feel free is when all those thoughts, the controlling thoughts, the behaviors, they always loom around the corner. They're going to be there. They came from somewhere. I was raised in a very controlling environment. My parents are very controlling. It's in me, it's in my nervous system, it's in my DNA. But there's space in between those triggers and then the reactions. So I'm able to be like in a state of like emotional turmoil, or I want to, focus on my body, or I want to, sometimes I even have, like, I've gotten to a point where um, meals are so regular for me because they're important for me. Like, when I was in treatment, I viewed meals as my full time job. I didn't see them as, at first they were the bane of my existence. And I fought my dietitian every time. I was like, why are you giving me this much to eat? It doesn't make any sense. But once I got out of treatment, there was a part of me that understood that if I mess with that, then I'm going back to everything that I was struggling with. Like I just really got that. I think like some of the dietitian groups really helped because I learned that there's a actual physical component that works for my mental health. So if my physical body is taken care of, then my mental health is also in a better place. Um, so I genuinely viewed my meals as a part of my job. If I'm in treatment, this is my job. And I know that is a mindset that I was lucky to develop. I know that that's something that a lot of my peers struggled with. And to this day, I view meals as my job. It's been so many years now since I've left treatment, and still I have the same hustle around like it's meal. Like I got it because it's my way of ensuring that I'm free. And it sounds kind of like it doesn't really make sense, I guess, to myself. With like if I were to hear that and I had my eating disorder, full-blown eating disorder, I'd be like, what do you mean? Like that sounds awful. But I'm like, no, because even though my mind tells me to restrict, I don't. And I think that's freedom because I'm giving my body what it needs, and I'm no longer allowing my eating disorder to tell me to restrict the things that I need in my life. Um, so I think the freedom there is being able to have some autonomy and choice, even when your brain is working against you.
Okay, okay, I can go. I think yes, I see. Thank you. I think we've got everybody muted now, so just be mindful of muting. Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I think what I love about this is that we'll all have really different experiences. And for me, weight restoration was part of my process of recovery. And so I kind of have two answers to this. I know exactly what you mean when you say that recovered enough place versus freedom. I know exactly what you're talking about, whoever asked this question. I lived in the recovered enough space for a while. And for me, the experience was, it was, I was no longer nearly as ill as I had been, but it was still kind of a constant part of my brain space, my mental space. And I was always kind of teetering on the precipice of a relapse, because I was so close. Um, I have to say, in my body and my brain, getting weight restored, not the bottom of weight restored, but fully weight restored, really renourished, was a game changer. It really, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was metabolic or hormonal, but something changed significantly. And I hate it. I hate that that's the answer I am giving you. Like, I wish were different. I wish I could say, just, stay at the place you're most comfortable. For me, getting to a place where my body really was renourished made a huge difference in getting me from and I don't know the person who's asking it if that's part of your experience, so I'll just say that for me, and that that may not be part of your journey. I think the other thing that really changed for me, the other two pieces I would point to in my experience, was, I think, similar to Esther. I I was in a situation where I was balancing on that precipice that, like, in terms of my life and where I lived and who I was spending time with, that was not supporting me in my recovery. And I had to change that. I had to move to a new city. And that was a big game changer for me. Getting to with a new group of people, I started up yoga, and there's plenty of toxic wellness messages in yoga, but there's also a lot of healthy, supportive, positive, good energy people, and that really shifted. And I think the final thing was that I had, as part of that, I had things in my life that became more important than my eating disorder, and that made it easier to surrender, that made it easier to let go, to get fully into that renourished space. But I had to start seeking out things that were much, much bigger than my eating disorder. And that could be education, it could be, friend groups, it could be volunteering. Like, look at these two incredible women, Esther volunteering with three different organizations, and, and Caroline, I'm like, come join us, all of this. So I think that helped me as well, is getting into a place where there were things in my life it was almost like, if I was aware that if I were to relapse, my recovery was now tied up with other people's, and that really, really helped shift things. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not suggesting like a codependent dynamic, but my living fully was, I don't know, it was tied up with I just felt, I entered kind of a social contract with my community, with my family, that was like, you can't play small anymore. You have to, and I felt that, and then it was much easier.
Um, with like everyone that like all of them that we're talking about, it's like we're taking steps, right? It's like we didn't go from being like recovered enough to like fully freedom recovery. Like, these are steps. And I think that's so hard to hear, because it's like, if we're in that place like recovered enough, it's like, well, I've been stuck in this place for X amount of time. But this is all truly like, the timing is so much a part of it, of giving ourselves the compassion to say, like, this is where I'm at in this stage. And like, I can also allow myself the space to continue growing through it. Which for me is like a huge thing, because I want everything immediately. If I don't have it immediately, I'm like, it's never gonna happen. It can't be true for me. So trying to say like, okay, like, I can take steps each day, and it can be what I view as a tiny, tiny step, but in the long run, they all add up. one of my favorite things that I think I was engaged with before I even knew the term for it, which I later learned is called opposite action, was like anything that my eating disorder wanted me to do. I was able to say, like, okay, well, like that's the eating disorder voice. I was able to parse that apart from my personal voice and able to say, okay, the eating disorder wants me to do X, I'm going to do Y, whatever the opposite was, to help myself say, like, okay, I'm like redirecting my neural pathways instead of falling back into that easy pattern, to say, like, this is a very clear swap that I could make. And it's not easy. It wasn't 100% of the time I chose it, but it was like giving myself that pause to say, like, okay, I can identify what the other action would be. And if I'm able to, all things aligned, able to make that opposite choice, that was giving me a break from the eating disorder and taking away that, which again means the eating disorder fires up louder for me. And then I had to also then reach out for support and say, like, hey, I made like, I'm doing the opposite action. And now like the eating disorder voice is really loud. Can I be distracted? Can we play a game? Can we talk on the phone? Can I watch a movie? Like distraction was really important for me in those times when I was able to challenge and engage in that opposite action. But values, I think Caroline mentioned values earlier. Values are also like, and have been a super important part of my life too. And being able to have like a very clear narrative phrase of like, okay, one of my main values is connection. And when when I was engaged in my eating disorder, connection was not an option. I was so easily like thrown into emotions and so like on the verge at all times of not being able to like communicate with people. And whenever I was thinking about engaging in an eating disorder behavior, I'd be like, does this align with my value of connection? Oftentimes, no. It was usually isolating. It was usually something that was going to pull me away from the people that I cared about, the people I was trying to build a relationship with again, and saying, like, okay, if this is going to pull me away from that value, do I want to risk that choice? And having to be like a little bit confrontational with myself and saying, like, I'm giving myself the space to choose that. And it's okay on the days that I chose to engage in the behaviors. I didn't say, like, you're a terrible person and you chose against everyone that you love. It was like, okay, that was my eating disorder. My eating disorder won that time. And I have another chance. The next time I have that thought, I can also challenge it again. So that's where like weaving in the self-compassion with that, which is so hard when the eating disorder is like abjectly against self-compassion. Because it just, when we're harsh on ourselves, when we bully ourselves, that's, I'll use I language. When I bully myself and when I'm harsh on myself, I move myself away from healing. That puts me back into a place where I then am like, well, I can never win. If I'm pushing myself down, how am I going to hear a voice that's saying, like, you got this, you can do it? Yeah. So steps and the pauses.
I think for me, I have so much work to do. Um, and so hearing all of your guys' perspectives is really helpful for me. But yeah, I think that I have so much work to do and I feel really like hopeful about that. And it actually feels great to see it in that way because I think I got to a point where I was recovered enough and that was game changing for me. Because I really just got to have my life back and everything that I valued most and brought me the most joy, I got to get all of that back. So for me, being recovered enough was a huge game changer, but then it wasn't until recently that I was like, well, that's not enough. And so for me, it was a great realization to push myself past just recovered enough and start to think about, well, how can I work on things? How can I um maintain like all of these things that I got back in my life? How can I keep them and grow? And so yeah, for me recently it's just been kind of back to what I said about how I bridged the gap, like just continuing to not isolate myself and build community and even getting involved with Eat, Breathe, Thrive and stuff like that. I feel like that's taking me further than just recovered enough. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I have to say that was just like three cheers for Recovered Enough because Recovered Enough is game changing. Like it really is, like getting there. So I think it, and then when you get there, you can reevaluate and go, okay, oh, do I want to take another step? But I think it's, yeah, if you're in that place of recovered enough or not even recovered enough, that's like that. I love that idea, Lydia, of what you said of, taking small steps. Like it's yeah, that's beautiful. I think we have time for one more question. We might have to be quick, and it's a big question, but I kind of want to end on one other one. So I'm going to give this to us and we'll just try to be mindful of time. But it's been a little conversation in the chat around, um, has anyone experienced treatment trauma, or sometimes it's called iatrogenic harm, where maybe there's been a traumatic experience in treatment. And I'm going to kind of add to that. How did you navigate that? How did you navigate your recovery with that there, with the presence of that, or in spite of that, or I know it's a huge question, so we probably have time for like a minute and a half for each of us.
I'll pop in real quick. I did not experience treatment trauma, so I'm not going to speak to this one.
I didn't realize I had treatment trauma until every time I talk about treatment, I start shaking. So there's that. I think my black and white thinking really helped me in that aspect, because I felt lucky that I went willingly. Well, actually, I didn't know that residential was going to trap you there. I thought it was going to be like a luxury stay and I can leave whenever I want. So I was in for a rude awakening. But I had this goal of like, my eating disorder led me here, even though I want to go back to it, my eating disorder. I know what's waiting for me. So this is an unknown path. And every part of treatment was hard, other than the beautiful human connection that I received that got me through the horrible days. I think really, really reminding myself of the goal, like instead of focusing on the constant, like just I don't sugarcoat treatment to anyone. I have a lot of love for it because it saved me, but it was also the worst time of my life. And then the best time of my life, like equal opposite reaction. So I don't sugarcoat that it's awful, but keeping that in mind where I'm like, okay, I'm going to get out of here eventually. I'm not going to be here forever. It feels like I'm going to be. So what can I learn from this? What are they trying to teach me? What through the rubble is the light? And I had to use that black and white mindset to be like, there's something here and I have to keep searching for that hope. So instead of being bombarded by how awful everything is, it's really up to the individual to find a why. If you find a why to be there, I think it's a lot more bearable, and it is temporary. Treatment is temporary as long as we don't use it to cut corners and then have it be a revolving door for the rest of our life. Then treatment is, prison, in my opinion.
Do you want to go and then I can close this out? Or
I don't know that I fully experienced treatment trauma, or maybe I just haven't um processed it yet. So I don't know if I have, yeah, the most to share on this.
that's good. This is a good sign for treatment. Not all of us identify with having treatment trauma. Um, yeah, I like Esther. I certainly experienced treatment trauma, and I wouldn't be alive without it. And I'm working with someone right now who is currently experiencing treatment trauma, so this is very fresh for me. I experienced treatment trauma and I had involuntary experiences in treatment that were, a deprivation of my liberty, and that I would say could have been done in a much less violent way, and that can happen. So I want to acknowledge that happens. So I don't know if that's where this is coming from in you, but if it is, one of the things I had to do was realize that just because that had happened at one place or with one team didn't mean it was going to always happen, or that it was going to happen again. And I had to place my trust in a team and I had to know that black and white thinking that Esther is talking about. I had to go, just because I've experienced this once doesn't mean it's going to happen every time. And I can trust people, and there are people out there who can, I can trust, I can surrender all of that. So that was a really big piece for me. And then I think I think there's also a piece to acknowledge that treatment itself can be traumatizing, even when it's not like that kind of extreme experience I've described. I think of it as like re-breaking a bone in order to set it. It's physically very difficult. Emotionally, you're taken out of your home sometimes if you're going into an inpatient clinic or a residential clinic or even a day treatment clinic, right? You're being kind of pulled out from your community. Maybe you're having to go through experiences in your past that are really difficult, or like Caroline was saying, hear other people's experiences that can be quite difficult. I found renourishing really traumatizing. I had, intestinal blockages at one point. It was really difficult, and I wouldn't be alive without it. So I think that there's I was saying to someone this week that I've had more traumatizing experiences and less. There's like, do you know what I mean? But I think trusting that you can weather those experiences. And I think coming back to what Esther said, it is temporary. This is one moment, and it's probably not going to be anything like what you've experienced in the past. So if there's one thing we know is that everything changes. So if you've had a traumatic experience in the past, you may have a traumatic experience in the future, but it certainly won't be anything like the past one. Everything is going to be new and fresh. And so I think finding a team that you can really work with and that you can trust, reminding yourself that just because it's happened once doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And also, I think trusting yourself that you are strong and capable, and coming back to what you're doing it for. It's if we go with the bone analogy, you don't want a bone sticking out of your elbow the rest of your life. So there's a reason you're enduring that pain for a short period of time, and trusting that it will end, and that if you've a whole bunch of others that have gone through it, that you will survive it, and you can get through it to the other side. Okay, if you could go, this is final question to round us out. If you could go back in time to yourself when you were in it, and say one sentence of take the wisdom of now to you back then. What would it be? No pressure. Well, I'll start with reading something that's come through the chat while you will treat yourself with the same grace and compassion that you would treat anyone else.
I think I would have, knowing what I do now, I think it's going to be cliche, but trust the process, and recovery is possible. I think surrendering and then having that faith through just the unknown is just so important.
I think for me, I'm cheating because this is something that you, Chelsea, said to me. So it's not, it's your words, but it was when I was really, really in the thick of it. And I was at coffee with Chelsea, and she said, it's so much better on the other side. It's so much, she's just said, it's so much better over here. And that's what I would want to tell myself, because I still remember her telling me that. And that gave me so much hope, because I wanted it so bad. And now I know it's true. It's so much better. So yeah.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Go for it, Lydia.
First thing, I can break the cycle. That's the first thing I would say to myself. And then the second thing, I'm cheating, 2 sentences, would be recovery ends up becoming easier than living with the eating disorder. And I think keeping that in mind for me is so important. Of like, I know that living with my eating disorder was 10 times harder than my days in recovery now.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. Well, Caroline, you took the words out of my mouth. So, but I'll add a little piece to it. I was going to say, it, your life will be so much fuller and richer, but also your life would be so much fuller and richer because of this, because you've gone not only is it fuller and richer on the other side, but having gone through this, your life, you will have so much more to give to your relationships, and you will and your life just, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've lived a really big life because I know what it's like to think about not having one, so um and you can do it. That's it. Oh my gosh, I did like 4 sentences. I totally cheated. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm loving all these comments in the chat, and yeah, I just want to thank Caroline, Esther, Lydia. Thank you so much, and the Eating Disorder Foundation for doing this with us. This. I love this event so much that I come to everyone.
It hasn't even been an option for me to not come. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what I look forward to. And we're not alone. I saw someone put that
Yeah.
in the comments in the chat. No one is alone going through this. That is a huge point of why we do this and why we all talk about recovery, is because we've known what it's been like. I'll speak for myself. I've known what it's been like to be isolated in this experience, and to say that no one else knows what's going on, and that shame that I carried in silence. And I don't want anyone to feel that way. And I want everyone to know that we have spaces to talk about it and to heal together.
Oh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. And when you emailed me, Lydia, I immediately responded like, yeah, of course, I'll be there. No questions asked. So thank you. It was such an honor to be here. And I just want to let everybody know, like, if you logged in, even though you might be in the thick of your eating disorder, that's your healthy self who logged in today. And that's the part of you that's going to keep moving you forward. So have faith in that more than the eating disorder, because your eating disorder could have been just like, whatever, we're not going, it's early or it's inconvenient, but you came, and that means you want recovery. So just believe in that part of yourself.
Thank you so much. I was so honored to be a part of this conversation.
Oh, thanks, everyone. Okay, have a good day or good evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.